Are you very hungry though?
Do you not want to eat your shoe?
Friends are looking tasty though.
Surely they are edible.
No, 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 no!
Monster, monster, cooking the monster.
Cooking the Monster is proudly presented by Herbert, Matly, and Kistrix.
Monster, monster, cooking the monster tonight.
Good evening, and welcome back to
Cooking the Monster.
Tonight. We're going to start our series on goblinoids. Now, a lot of people might think that orcs are the pinnacle of the goblinoid species, but it's actually very specific in Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition, and the three goblinoid races are hobgoblins, goblins, and bugbears, with hobgoblins being the progenitor species and goblins and bugbears being the two subspecies of the race. Tonight, we're going to look specifically at hobgoblins.
So hobgoblins are a martial species. You'll often find them in armor, leading groups. They tend to be hierarchical in nature. They also tend to be slightly larger than humans and have toned, defined muscles. This is useful for knowing where to cut and knowing what to cook.
It makes them very easy to break down into serviceable choice cuts of meat. Now, one of the most important things to understand about hobgoblins is that they are a very high-stress race, which is what creates their very wiry physique. But it also means that there are large amounts of adrenaline just waiting at any given moment to be pumped into their system, which will dramatically change the flavor of the meat and sometimes even the consistency. It'll add a very bitter and sometimes just off texture or off flavor to the food.
Obviously, the use of a mage with a sleep spell can help with this, if they don't know that you're there.
Or just being very confident that you're able to remove consciousness and life from that hobgoblin in a single strike.
Once that's done, of course, remove clothing, remove armor, drain the blood, very important, do it away from your camp, of course.
You don't want to encourage the other larger predators or scavengers to come hanging around your campsite. Hobgoblins, unlike bugbears or goblins, are probably one of the cleaner goblinoids. They are a proud sentient race, and as such value their personal hygiene over the other races or the other sub-races of the species.
Much more lawful, much more organized.
Of course, you're also more likely to find them in smaller groups. Unless they're marshalling in large armies, you should be able to get one or two in a single instance. And again, as we discussed in our first episode of Monster Chef, we're not encouraging you to murder and eat sentient species, but sometimes needs create a must, create a desire. And also, you might be playing a game where you're not necessarily playing races that have the same moral compass that other conventional adventuring parties do.
Particularly on long-term trips into the Underdark or underground locations, you may find that, firstly, there's not a lot of agriculture, and secondly, that other sources of food are incredibly limited.
Hobgoblins, much like humans, need to be dealt with in a very simple way when it comes to butchery. They won't have as much liquid in the body, because as mentioned, they are wiry, but they also will not have as much fat in the body either. Consider the diet of a hobgoblin to be probably more on the carnivorous side, but pretty similar to a human diet.
Absolutely. The higher percentage of meat and a higher percentage of the population will be involved in warfare, so you're unlikely to find as many hobgoblin bakers or brewers or so on. They tend to more enslave bakers and brewers and so on.
And because of the martial nature of their society, most of the corpses that you'll find will tend to carry a large amount of scar tissue, which can be broken down, but is largely best to avoid when it comes to preparing the meat.
And for more information about flavouring, we'll be passing over to Kistrix and the Wild Wood Apothecary.
Thanks, guys. When cooking your goblinoid species, there are two herbs that I think are going to be really important. The first one is the chaga mushroom, Inotus obliquus. Chaga mushroom is a parasitic fungus that can be found on birch trees. It is an immunomodulator and antioxidant. Because goblinoids are meat consumers, they have really high levels of omega-6 fatty acids, which can place oxidative stress on the body. So by adding the chaga mushroom, for example in a chaga mushroom and honey glaze, to our goblin meats, we can help reduce the oxidative stress on our adventurers' bodies. I'd also recommend using the acid splash cantrip to cook chaga mushrooms, as this helps retain some of their constituents like the polysaccharides. Equisetum species, also known as horsetail, is a very ancient plant. It doesn't require photosynthesis to grow, so it's going to be found in a lot of dark areas where our goblinoid species are going to be living. It should be really easy for adventurers to find, and it's kind of a nodal sheathed plant, and it will be found all over the world. It's really good because it is known to strengthen the body, and it's also a really good connective tissue strengthener. The flavour is also going to pair very well with our goblinoid meats. When flavouring your hobgoblin, consider using stinging nettle, also known as Urtica urens. It's a really common weed that can be found around town or out in the wild. It has heart-shaped, serrated leaves that are covered in a fine layer of hairs. Stinging nettle was used by the ancient people as a whip to help strengthen their bodies. It's also a really great tonic for the adrenal glands, particularly if you're using the seeds to flavour the meat.
Thank you for watching, and if you've got any recipes you'd like to share with us, please leave them in the comments below.
Monster, monster, cooking the monster